Hello everyone. Today is Tuesday, which means we'll have a core protocol sync discussion, uh, talking about what we've done through the last week and what are the plans for the future. Lucian, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so here's my screen.
Yep.
Yeah, great. So last week, it was main focus on the extrinsic execution proof. Yeah, I submitted two PRs to the substrate. One is to fix the undeterministic storage proof. Yeah. So the main problem is okay. So let me. Okay, should be in here. Yeah, the main problem was that the actual container to store the stored values accessed during the execution is this hash map, which is undeterministic. I initially was trying to replace it with the bitmap, but using bitmap has some other issues. So they finally decided to sort before we convert this proof recorder, the final storage proof. We decided to sort before you convert it to the storage proof. Yeah. I'm still waiting for their final review, I would say. But yeah, I'm still waiting. The second,
can we not keep working on it in the meantime on our own branch, on our own fork?
Yeah, but I think it can be merged soon, maybe this week. So I think it's not hurry.
Okay, well, I guess we can talk about that when we get to next steps. I just don't want that to block you because that's the next task, kind of depends on that working, the next critical task.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. That's when our next step. Yeah. The second PR is nothing special. Is to expose some necessary data structures I need to generate the execution proof for any extrinsic for in some block. Basically, is to expose this overlay. Yeah, nothing special actually. So yeah, there's everything happened in the last week. So for this week and the plans for next few weeks. Yeah, I quickly wrote some documents. So my current idea is I have listed a few features that I think are necessary for the initial phase for the testnet that are open to the public community. So yeah, we can have a discussion about them. One is the executive staking, and the another one it's nice to have or must have we need to think of merging the subspace series binary into the subspace node binary, because I would like to get the community get familiar with the process of running an executive node. So, yeah, any thoughts, comments?
We're not thinking about doing anything with staking until maybe version 2 or even version 3 of the incentivized testnet. So in version 1 of I guess version 0 of community farming, there will absolutely no staking. Maybe not even an executor, maybe an executor. We're not sure yet. Version 1 of incentivized testnet, if there's an executor, it will be fully permissioned. Just one single executor run by Subspace Labs, or maybe a handful of them. But yeah, it's probably not going to come for a while. It's not a priority on the roadmap to have any staking or registration. So I think the way that we have it working right now is probably fine for the next month or 2.
So you mean our focus for the next few weeks will be the security steps or the
So the most important thing first is to have the full fraud-proof workflow, to have a test case where we can generate an invalid state transition, have a second node on the network, a full node who's not even an executor, who's not staked or not registered, who can generate a fraud proof. The fraud proof gets picked up by the blockchain, and then it reverts the old execution receipt. So that's the critical path right now.
Actually, like the staking is composed of a few features, which includes the registration, rewarding, and slashing, in my opinion. So if you you're talking about the registration, the executor registration, yeah, that's part of the staking.
I think in terms of priorities, the merge of Subspace series into Subspace node will be higher priority than staking even, because that's like a big usability problem. How do you actually run it? And it'll probably allow us to remove some things which are necessary at that point. So I would reorder them probably.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about this issue. Another problem just comes, that is how we treat the currently forked Cumulus dependencies and the Polkadot dependencies, which is mainly for the overseer and the embedded permit chain architecture. The Cumulus was planning to get rid of these embedded relay chain nodes to the WebSocket approach. So I would like to wait for the transition to this RPC approach to become more stable.
But they're doing it because they want to have one relay chain and potentially many parachains, because if you want to run multiple parachain nodes, it's a lot of overhead, right? But in our case, we don't have that problem. So I don't see why we need to follow and wait for Polkadot to do something.
You still have to contain this one relay chain primary nodes in this secondary node, right? But that is
relationship is different. I'm thinking about it as if the primary node starts, we have a client instance, and we use that client as dependency injection into the secondary node. So the secondary node doesn't need an overseer. It basically needs to drive two futures. One future is for the primary node, the second secondary node, and it just runs.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that we can't get rid of this overseer. We need an alternative, right? A way to communicate between the secondary node and this primary node, right?
Well, I wouldn't call it a communication. It's more like the secondary node requests something. So if you have access to client from the primary node, you can just call a method on it. That's it. That's all you need.
Yes. You request some like information from the primary chain.
So you probably just need to introduce some kind of trait and probably like refactor it upside down. But I don't think we need overseer in the way that like Polkadot designs it and the way they use it. We don't have that kind of mechanism.
Let me think. So we still need to access to some state of the primary chain, right?
Yes, you need to have access to the client. So you can like call runtime API, or you can like query the storage.
Well, without this overseer, you have to like resort to some like RPC approach.
But you don't need RPC. You have this. You have it in the same executable. You just need to have access to the client. It's like an argument.
That way you're still running this like Subspace. Okay, you are saying.
So if you combine them into one application, then you have direct access. You don't need RPC. You don't need anything.
Okay, I might see it. You mean the executor still like runs this Subspace node, right?
Yeah, it's rather Subspace node runs executor, like as an option. Like if you specify dash executor, it will run it. If you don't specify it will not run it.
Okay.
So just like Ozgan is running node within the desktop application,
yeah.
You can run secondary node in the primary node.
Okay, I can see it. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So that's okay. That's interesting. This is a good discussion, but that's actually a major architectural change, and I think there might be some. I think we might actually be losing something if we don't have the overseer. If we have any kind of parallel execution, or we might lose one way to do parallel execution if we get rid of the overseer. And I think it's kind of sounds simple at a high level, but from an implementation point of view, there's so much about the way that it's wired up around the overseer that I think it's going to be a substantial amount of work to refactor it to work like that.
Right.
So we just need to consider. Go ahead.
Yes, but on the flip side, we have a lot of code, like we have procedural macros that we support, just so we have overseer, which we really don't need. Like we have just one service there instead of like multiple that Polkadot has. Like we have a lot of machinery just to support the architecture that we basically don't need. We just inherited the architecture because we can move faster. But we are starting to spend some time to maintain that architecture instead of just drop it.
Yeah,
so
but
yes, it will be a major change, but it will be a beneficial one, I think.
In Polkadot, was the design requirement for the overseer to support multiple parachains running on the same machine for one relay chain node?
Well, the architecture is upside down because they have multiple parachains which are like separate teams that want to include relay chain. So relay chain needs to be like includable in a special way and have like special kind of communication. But in our case, they are more coupled together. So we don't need that flexibility, that like complexity that they have. We don't need those like procedural macros.
Okay, I think we probably need to have another offline discussion about this. This is a pretty serious change. And just in terms of priorities, I feel like we haven't even gotten it working yet, and we're talking about re-architecting the whole system. So we still need to demonstrate that the full decoupled execution workflow even works properly in the current architecture before we optimize the architecture to make it more maintainable. But I agree, it's higher priority than staking. Okay, so Lu Cheng, what are the, like, assuming this PR is approved by Parity, what are the next steps to have a full test case of fraud that is handled correctly?
Well, once this is like merged to Substrate, we can like actually generate the extrinsic execution proof in Subspace or in series, and then we will write some test cases.
Okay, so we haven't even been able to generate that proof yet because we're getting these invalid results.
Yeah, we haven't actually started this.
Okay. Okay, and I guess I don't understand why we can't just continue to work on that in a branch and then just merge those changes in once they accept the PR.
Yeah, sure, we can, of course. I initially thought that it could be like merged soon, so yeah, I can work on another branch.
Okay.
Okay, so if I continue this direction, I will like make a separate branch. I will generate this proof in series. I'll write some tests for this like fraud proof, right? Okay.
So there should be two test cases right now. The first test case is the happy path. Well, maybe you could write this as one, but
yeah, the happy path I would say is this like proof generated by two means.
Yeah, right. They both the validator. Well, it's not even that the proof is generated by the same means. It's just that they agree on the execution receipt. I guess if you're calling that the proof, but just as long as they get the same state root, that's the happy path, right? They agree on what that state root is.
You mean two executors have this same state? That means the happy path.
Yeah. So one executor is the authority node who generates the state, proposes the execution receipt. And then there's a second executor, which is just a full node, who receives the execution receipt, and it matches what they got locally. So they don't do anything. They just apply the block and keep going. So that's the happy path. So the unhappy path, which we need to have a test case for as well, is okay. The first executor produces a execution receipt, but they did it incorrectly. The second executor receives the execution receipt. They detect the difference.
Gotcha.
And then the whole mechanism of, okay, now I generate a fraud proof. Then I send the fraud proof to the farmer, and the farmer spins up the VM, or well, just runs it, applies the fraud proof locally, and gets true or false. Is this fraud or not? And if it gets true, then it should take the new execution receipt that it receives. In place of that, it should revert the old execution receipt. And I guess there's actually two test cases there. One is fraud proof is invalid, the execution receipt is invalid and the fraud proof says, yes, it is. And the other is, well, maybe the malicious executor, malicious full node says, oh, well, this is an invalid fraud proof, but it actually was valid. So that's even another, I guess, attack vector.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like we have another dependency here to be able to actually run that VM and run the state transition function on the primary chain, which I don't think we have right now at all.
Actually, I think it's just validation for the state transition. Might be possible. I'll look into this when I come to that point. I think should be possible. right? No. Yeah.
But regular farmer, it doesn't really know that executor exists right now. So only those like executor nodes will be able to verify. Is that what you mean?
Isn't there like a
So-
palette executor that the farmer has, like a palette for, where it knows which executors are authority nodes?
Right, but what I'm saying is that you need to have access to the WASM blob of the runtime of the executor to actually run the same state transition function for the transaction and compare the outputs or like verify that it was actually correct.
Right.
And right now there is no connection between them. That's why I feel like we need to make it like one application, because then we can build one runtime, like the secondary runtime, and we can include that into the primary runtime. And then when secondary runtime starts, it can like follow the primary chain. And when there is runtime upgrade for the secondary chain there, like, it should basically follow the primary chain all the time. So primary chain will always have access to that runtime. I think we can like hack it right now to only like verify on the executor nodes. Like regular plain farmer will not be able to do that. And it will be like a step forward, but it like all ties together.
Okay, we can discuss it again when we come to that point.
Okay.
So yeah, that's everything on my side.
Okay, thanks. It sounds like we're making great progress there, Li Cheng. So let's keep that up, and hopefully we'll be able to test that workflow soon.
Okay.
Definitely.
Do you, Oskin, Li Cheng, or sorry, Oskin and Ivan, do you guys have any questions? Like, it's really important you guys understand this. So if you guys are like lost right now, you need to stop us and say like, I don't understand how this works, because it all ties together to what we're doing. Do you understand? It's okay to shake your head no.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll have an essay quiz after this. You guys will have to explain this back to me via email. Okay.
All right. Ozgan, do you have anything to talk about today?
No. You are muted, Neza.
Did you need to make any like changes on the node to embed it into desktop application, or is it all?
Leo figured out that we may need to disable WASM execution compiled. I'm not sure of that. I will try that tomorrow.
Why?
And he says he's getting a weird bug. So I wasn't able to test that right now. Tomorrow I will test it, and I will write to you. I will ping you if there is an error, if I get an error or not. So other than that, everything is working and everything is fine. So that's all. No significant change in the backend.
As soon as you are using WASM, whether you compile it or not, it shouldn't make a difference in terms of results. It will only make a difference in terms of performance, because if you're using compiled, it will spend some time to actually compile WASM into native executable. That's
not only compiled, also execution strategy WASM. He also disabled that too.
Okay, that's a problem, because there is already an open draft pull request in Parity Substrate which will remove native execution altogether, because it's not identical in some cases to the WASM, and they want to make sure it's absolutely the same always.
With WASM.
So this is definitely not an option. If you have some problem, I would like again to see an issue in our Discord, because I was not aware like what kind of error you are getting and why. I think it's fairly important.
Yeah, as I said, I will tomorrow test it and see if I get any error on my machine as well, so that we can confirm with Leo. And then If so, we can open an issue on GitHub and a thread in Discord, so we can discuss it together.
Okay. Fine. All right, Ivan, do you have something to share?
Yeah, sure. So my onboarding is finally finished. On the Wednesday, we had a talk with Jeremiah and discussed the papers related to the decoupled execution. So everything's fine with that. Meanwhile, after that, I was helping a bit Serge with the pilot feeds related to the some Rust compilation issues related to the grandpa finality gadget and everything. So also today we had a call with Nazar with the my future plan. So I will be working on the farmer side. I started working on the adding the address for rewards for the farmer. So that we have separate identities for the rewards and for the farmer itself. So after that, I will move on to the partial and multi-replica for farmers. So yeah, finally there is some clear roadmap on that. That's it from my side.
Okay, questions to Ivan on this? I will talk about the address for rewards a little bit later.
Yeah, how did it go with helping Serge with pilot feeds?
Everything's okay. I mean, there were no some major issues. So all of the issues were just like around 5 minutes to come to some conclusion. So yeah, everything's okay with that. I asked him if he needs any help with that. I mean, while I was waiting for Nazar, so he said that the context was a bit too large to get fit into some short amount of time. So yeah, we decided to not onboard me on that.
Okay, so you just kind of helped to unblock him around his Rust compilation errors, and he was able to get back to what he was doing.
Yeah, basically.
Great.
All right, thanks, Ivan. On my side, there wasn't really much happening due to well-known reasons. However, I did put together a small Notion page about the multi-address. Okay, let me select the window that I want to discuss because it's something that we have not finalized, and we do need to have a discussion on that. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, so basically we have some things around reward address that makes us makes difficulties when we want to have multi-replica, when we want to have cold wallet support, for instance. Right now, what we have a solution structure that looks like this. We have just a public key here, which is tied both to the signature and like a plot and to the like block signature, the whole thing. And that's where we take the address that needs to that should receive a farmer reward, right? So we have this public key. There are several problems. On the testnet, some people tried to copy the identity of the farmer and already had their plot burned. I would imagine this will happen more going forward. We don't support cold wallets, like when you have only public key and not the private key, and you don't want to have cold wallet connected to the computer all the time. That's not cold wallet anymore. And when we have multi-replica farming, where we have a max plot size limit, and we want to create multiple plots with different identities that are somehow derived from the primary identity, let's say, then with this approach, we'll basically send rewards to those many derived identities instead of one identity that the farmer controls, which is very inconvenient if you want to like import all those identities to your Poco.js extension, let's say. and that will be like very, very tedious. That needs to be, we need to do something about it. So the solution that I propose here is basically to add something like reward address command line parameter if you are talking about CLI application of the farmer, where you can specify your address where you want to receive the reward. Then we'll basically extend the solution with just one extra field, reward address, where we'll specify where the reward should go instead of this initial public key. Everything else stays basically the same. And then that could be a cold wallet, that could be derived from the like a primary identity that doesn't really matter. It can be really anything. And how it will work, there are some notes on terms of implementation. There was a concern that people will need to create a Polkadot.js extension wallet before they can even use the farmer. That's not necessarily the case. We can still have, in terms of implementation, our like primary identity from which we'll derive all those other identities for different plots, and we can still use the same identity of some like seed and like wallet under that seed, deterministically derived, where the rewards will go. So farmer user like can still have the same sort of experience. They just start a farmer, we generate identity automatically, we send rewards, but to one that one single identity instead of multiple. And if you want, you can specify a custom one. That's totally fine, but you can still preserve the current user experience even when we transition to multi-replica absolutely transparently for the end user. And in terms of prior art, we have proof of work mining software everywhere that both with solo mining and with mining pools require you to specify the address where you want to receive reward because there is no like plot identity there. So this is like really, really simple kind of approach, I think, that they wanted to just present. And I think if it makes sense to everyone, this is what we can move from.
I also mentioned something like that. Yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense to me too.
Jeremiah, do you see any concerns?
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. The only concern, maybe I'm not sure if I understood you correctly, but this would be opt-in, like they would have to provide a special command to have this reward address. It wouldn't be the default.
That's like that's a point of discussion. We can do it either way. I was thinking initially make it opt-in, and then we can decide what we want. On the desktop side, for instance, we can provide an identity and we can provide the public key. We can decide in the graphical interface how we want to do it. We can like ask a question: do you have a wallet? No. Okay, we'll do it like quick start. So I think initially it will be opt-in, and we'll see what people think about it.
Well, my concern there is that like just nobody will understand the difference or why they need it. And so like the issue that Skylar had where he, loaded it on a different computer and then burned his plot, like it would be lost on him if you had to explain to him like, well, you have to use this feature flag in order to, or this, special command in order to prevent that from happening. And the way to solve that problem is just to make it the default. So even if you're just using one identity, you always have a reward address and the one identity for the plot, and just make it like transparent to the user completely. If they want, they can still like import it, like generate it however they want, generate it, import it, whatever, like different options like that, like they already have. But I think it should just be automatic. They don't have to think about it.
So you want it to be opt-in?
No, I want it to be not opt-in. I want it to be the default. So there's no special flag. It would have to be opt-out. Like you would have to say, actually, I don't want to have. Well, I don't know. I don't think we should allow them to not have a reward address. It should just be the standard implementation.
So you should always require the reward address.
Yeah, I mean, but from their point of view, there's no notion of like a reward address. Like from the CLI's point of view or the desktop farmer's point of view, there's no distinction between reward addresses and plot addresses. There's a reward address, and then the plot addresses could be derived like randomly you know, an instantiation of the plot from that reward address, like as a seed or a signature or something like that.
That's what I'm
but-
saying. Reward address is a public key. It's not a private key. You cannot derive private keys from it.
Right. Well, you could if you had access to the private key.
Right, but we are talking explicitly about the fact that we only need the public key here. Like, if you have a cold wallet, you like physically cannot extract the private key from it. I mean, if you have a seed, you can, but like that's not the way it's designed to work. So
I guess my point is this is complicated, and like it's like in Polkadot, you know, the notion of the stash wallet and the signing key and the session key. This just is notoriously confusing to people, and there's many people who just won't actually use the default staking interface on Polkadot because they feel like they're going to mess something up, and so they go use like a centralized provider to do this. So just saying, however, like we need a reward address. I think it should be default. I just don't want to expose that complexity to the user by default. Just would rather that they don't have to think about that. They're just like, they just spin up a farmer. They know that there's some identity they're using behind that, which they can provide the public key, or it could be generated locally the first time for them. But we don't want them to have to like outside the system do some extra work to have this.
this is a little bit confusing to me. I think the fact that you have some kind of identity on the farm is an implementation detail. What you need to work is the reward address. That's what you care about. What kind of identity you're using for the plot doesn't really matter. Like it can be generated randomly. Like it's completely not important for the user. So if they always have to provide the address for rewards, it is a usability challenge because you need to have that wallet in the first place. That's why I'm saying that by default we can probably generate it, but we also should have the way to specify it. If you
For sure.
specify it, then it doesn't really matter. You don't have to clone your plot to another machine because like.
For sure. Yeah, I'm just saying that if they don't specify it, they still get one. So if they would like to specify a reward
Yes, that's
address,
what I'm
they
saying.
can.
Like, yes.
Okay. I thought you were saying that they only got a reward address if they specified it.
No, okay. Notes on implementation. Yes, not everyone, like some might have extension in wallet, not everyone will. So default behavior, if you don't specify anything, will be just like today. There is some identity generated automatically. Later, when you have rewards, you can actually like extract those rewards. That's the default behavior. So nothing is really changing for anyone unless you like opt in to providing this reward address.
Okay. Another case of us saying the same thing in two different ways and confusing each other.
Seems like, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
so it seems like everyone is on the same page. Go ahead.
Maybe kind of off topic, but the executor will also need an identity on an address. How the executor address will be like. So the executor will also have a separate address.
Well, on executor side, it's not just an address. You need private keys. That's why they have like session keys, they have like stash keys, they have like all of that complexity because you need to have hot access to the key pair.
I mean, the executor will have an separate standalone like a private key for this executor rule.
I think so.
Okay, and it's not related to any other kind of case. Yeah,
I think so.
Okay.
I think you could optionally have a single address to get farming and execution rewards to as well, if you wanted to.
You can specify the same, you're right, but yeah, but probably, yeah.
Because I think eventually we're going to get rid of this distinction from the user point of view between executors and farmers, and probably the desktop app is going to look something like, what resources would you like to pledge, like storage, compute, whatever. And so I think that it eventually will just all come down to just one address and one set of rewards that you're getting for providing resources to the network.
Okay, makes sense.
I mean, long term, not like in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Well, with
Eventually.
staking, it's a little bit tricky because there are, like, depends on how you implement it. But in Polkadot, for instance, they have the distinction between different ways how you can receive rewards. You can either receive it on a separate account and use it like immediately, or you can like add to your stake as you receive the rewards to like increase your stake over time.
Yeah.
So that is like an important thing for some people, I think, to have. So it will not be as simple as just one address necessarily. There should be like a way.
Actually, I think the way of Polkadot just is too complicated sometimes.
For sure. Like even for nominators, it's complicated. For executors, I imagine it's even more complex. But that's something we will need to deal a little bit later.
Okay, I think we're on the same page here.
All right. I don't think I have much to share beyond this so far. There are some bugs that were discovered. I still didn't work on them, but I'll probably do some work on that this week.
Okay, and can you just review the last where you left off at with the networking? I think there were some blockers from parity that we didn't come across.
Yes, there was that pull request about decoupling the sync process out of the networking implementation. It's still where it was before. I believe there was some commit on top, but it's not resolved yet. And I think where we'll start, just like I mentioned previously, we'll just create a simple sync process, which is basically before the node starts, if it makes sense. So like you can sync, you can import blocks from the archive basically in Substrate. We'll do kind of the same approach, but we'll import it from the network instead. And that should cover many of the mechanics that we'll use eventually anyway. So we can like test it. But it will not be quite the same sync process that we imagine when we are talking about the sync from the network. But it do like maybe 60–70% there. And hopefully in the meantime, they will have something that we can tweak. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you and I discussed that, but I don't remember if we talked about that with the rest of the group.
Maybe. I don't remember either. Okay, I think that's all we have today. Thanks everyone on YouTube for watching. We'll see you in one more week.